A pair of Zag wings stood out at Kraziness in the Kennel, proving just how deep Mark Few's team is this year.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Well, it is a Mailbag Monday episode. We got questions that we're going to get to in the second and third segment of the show, but we are going to start the show recapping what we saw on Saturday, the return of Gonzaga basketball officially. Kraziness in the Kennel. It was at 3 p.m. on Saturday. It was quite a spectacle. Hopefully many of you were able to see it. I know there was some confusion about how to watch the stream. It was on SWX live at 3 p.m. during the actual event. I know they replayed it as well, and I believe there are clips, if not the full event, up on YouTube now if you want to get a chance to watch it. So we're going to go through what happened at Kraziness in the Kennel. We're going to go through Sean Farnham's role. He was there, what that means for Gonzaga, why he was in the building. We'll talk about some of the other fun stuff we saw during that event. And then we'll get to those mailbag questions, primarily involving the big topic around the Gonzaga Bulldogs right now, their move to the Pac-12, what it means for Gonzaga, what it means for the Pac-12, and even what it means for the WCC. All right, let's start with Kraziness in the Kennel. Before we even get to the scrimmage, I want to start with a three-point shootout, which was the first event. And I didn't say this on Friday's show when I was previewing the event, but I kind of wish that I had, because I was trying to think who the three-point shootout in particular is an event where it's a snapshot of a certain amount of shot attempts in a small period of time. It doesn't necessarily give you any long-term data, but I was trying to think who would be the player that would be most impactful or most significant to see them win the three-point shootout. And I think I would have told you Dusty Stromer. Dusty Stromer is who, in fact, won the three-point shootout in this event. He had 16 points in the first round. Nolan Hickman also had 16 points in the first round. The two of them advanced to the championship round. Caleb Battle, one shot short. He had 15 points. Braden Huff also participated, had 11 points. And then in that championship round, Dusty Stromer had 17. Nolan Hickman promised everybody he was going to get 20. He instead got 14. Dusty ends up being the one who takes home this award. And again, him hitting one more three than Caleb Battle in the first round and a few more threes than Nolan. Like it's silly to we're not going to say Dusty Stromer is a better three-point shooter than Nolan Hickman. He's going to shoot better than him this year. Like, we're not jumping any of those conclusions necessarily, but this is an important step in the development of Dusty Stromer. And last year, Dusty was a below average three-point shooter in the first half of the year. And then when he transitioned to coming off the bench, when they made the starting lineup switch, Ben Gregg started, Dusty Stromer came off the bench, his role changed, and he was asked primarily to play tough defense, be impactful on that end of the floor, and offensively kind of float to the corner, get open looks from three, take the shot if it's there. If not, swing the ball around, kind of keep the offense moving. He wasn't a creator. He wasn't necessarily asked to do a lot more than that. And in the second half of the season, he shot over 40% from three because that role suited his skill set a little bit better. Now, coming into this year, I'm expecting him to come off the bench. Most people are projecting him to come off the bench. I think he's going to have a very important role for this team, but I think that him being able to be a knockdown three-point shooter is going to be valuable for this team. Outside of the three-point shooting, I want to focus more on Dusty Stromer because I thought he looked outstanding in the scrimmage game. He had a game-high 11 points, scored more points than anybody else. Ben Gregg was the only other player in double figures. He had 10. And more than just that, he went 2 of 4 from three, so he got more than half his points from the three-point line. But it's outside of that, I love seeing Dusty be aggressive. He put the ball on the deck. He drove to the rim. He looked a lot more confident and fluid offensively than we saw from him last year. And he wasn't asked to do that last year. I do think that is an important detail. What players are doing in a scrimmage game in front of the fans where they know Mark Few is not going to blow the whistle and yell at them is different than what you're going to see in a game setting. But I think that Dusty having more offensive versatility, having more in his bag, the ability to put the ball on the deck, drive to the rim, draw contact, finish through contact, or at least get to the free throw line, those kind of skills are valuable for Dusty to learn and are valuable for Gonzaga. He's going to learn a lot from Caleb Battle. He's going to learn a lot from Michael Ajayi. Like, those are guys who can come in and provide their skill set and showcase what they're able to do. And Dusty will learn from them. He will learn from guarding them. He will get better defensively at not, committing stupid fouls. Because if you're guarding Caleb Battle every day in practice, he's going to get you to commit fouls on him. So if you can learn how to better yourself defensively, that serves him and Gonzaga well in the future. And it also gives him more things to try out to add to his bag offensively. So really encouraged by what I saw from Dusty Stromer in this game. Not at all surprised to see him look better and just more fluid and just improved from last year. I think we would have expected that, but it was still nice to see. Other performances I want to talk about here. Emmanuel Innocenti, was excellent. I thought he was excellent in this game. I really liked what we saw from him. 7 points, 4 boards, and a steal. He was 3 of 7 shooting. He was only 1 of 5 from 3, but I actually like how confident he was taking those shots. He wasn't a great three-point shooter at Tarleton State, about 31%, pretty low volume, only 6.5 points a game, so he wasn't much of a scorer either. But he looked confident shooting the basketball, and he looked great defensively. This is what we knew we were going to get with Emmanuel Innocenti. He was a strong defensive player. He's big, he's long, he's physical. He's got the size to be like a really true 3 in the modern college basketball. He had a nice steal where he was just active, poked the ball away, went on a breakaway, got a dunk. It was just really good stuff. And in fact, Mark Few actually talked about Innocenti after the game. This is a quote I pulled from an article at the Spokesman Review by Justin Reed. Mark Few says, quote, "He's an incredible on-ball defender, a bigger wing, which we didn't have in the past. I think we talked about when he came in here, possibly redshirting, but he's been playing so good, it'll be interesting to see if we could end up doing that." So my assumption is that Emmanuel Innocenti is not going to redshirt. And I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that they were probably leaning towards not redshirting him. And then the Steele Venters injury really solidified that it's not in the cards to redshirt him this year. I think the only reason they would is if they feel far more confident about Jun-Suk Yo's ability to play the 3 in a consistent setting this season, which I thought Yo did some nice things as well. He was 1 of 4 from 3, but again, I thought they were good shots. He looked more confident in the offense, in the spots that he was supposed to be. So I do think that there's some upside there, but I'd be surprised at this point if Innocenti does end up redshirting, and I think the Zags are going to need him. He looked really, really good at the things that we knew he was going to be good at. We'll see about the shooting and how that kind of comes along, but I like this performance from him. The more notable newcomers to the team, of course, Michael Ajayi and Caleb Battle. Ajayi had 9 points, 8 boards, 2 assists, was 3 of 5 from the field. Mark Few talked about Ajayi after the scrimmage, said he thinks he's one of the best rebounders they've ever had. That is incredibly high praise for a player who's going to spend a lot of time playing the 3 and the 4, who's not a traditional center, who's not a Brandon Clark, Domantas Sabonis, Shemek Karnowski type guy. He's got a nose for the basketball. The shot form is going to take some getting used to. A lot of people kept mentioning how flat it looked, but I think he's a guy who's going to have the level of impact that we expected him to have, and that's great news for the Zags. Caleb Battle had 8 points, 5 boards. I love the line because it's exactly what we're going to see from him. Hopefully it's more than 8 points, but he was 1 of 4 from the field, 6 of 6 from the free throw line. That is spot on what we thought we were getting with Caleb Battle. He is a tremendous at putting pressure on the rim, getting to the basket, drawing contact, getting to the free throw line. That's what you want from him. Ismaila Diane, one of the other newcomers, he looked really raw because he's 17 years old. He's super raw. That's what you expect to see. I was stunned when I saw him on 2025 NBA draft boards before he came to Gonzaga. He was on those boards, and I was like, this kid he's not ready for that. That doesn't mean he's not going to be an NBA player. In fact, he probably will be, or at least he could be. But he looked really raw in this scrimmage. Good news, he's the 4th big. He's not expected to play much this year. I think that's great for him development-wise going forward. We talked about Sean Farnham being there. It was fun. It was a little corny, but I kind of thought that was right. That's what we wanted, right? If you missed this, Sean Farnham emceed the event. He was on the court. He was getting the crowd going. He was talking about like every event that was happening in between the scrimmages, during the commercial breaks. He introduced Mark Few. He did some funny video stuff. He had a video he recorded previously with Drew Timme and Corey Kispert and Joel Yayi, talking about like Gonzaga's move to the Pac-12 and some other stuff. It was just kind of fun to have him there. He's such a great ambassador for this program. He's covered over 150 Gonzaga games. He said that during the show and just was so excited to be there. And I love Sean Farnham. I'm happy that he's such a proponent of this program. I thought it was cool. He took time out of his schedule to come out here and do this. And then Mark Few, there was a moment before the actual scrimmage where they played a video for Mark Few that had been recorded by other members of Team USA, either players or coaches, and Grant Hill, who was, of course, the person who put together the roster and the coaching staff for this Olympic medal winning group this last year in Paris. And they put together the video. They played it for Mark for the first time he'd seen it, and he was emotional. You could tell he was kind of wiping away what appeared to be tears. And you don't see Mark Few show a lot of emotion very often, but it was really cool to see Kevin Durant say, like, hey, I'm not sure if we'd have won without you there, coach. And Spoelstra and Tyronn Lue talk about how they're rooting for him and they're excited to see how the season goes this year. And Grant Hill saying he's part of the best coaching staff that Team USA has ever had. Like, it was a nice moment. It was a nice, Mark Few downplays everything. He literally called coaching Team USA his little side project this summer, obviously tongue in cheek, but for him to get that, he doesn't like that kind of recognition. He's uncomfortable with it. You can tell. Sean Farnham even referenced that, but he deserves it. And seeing that happen and seeing that played on the big screen, and it was just a really cool moment. And I think a reminder of how lucky we are as Gonzaga fans to have a coach who has the character that he has, but also the ability to, go win a gold medal in the offseason and come back and kind of try to downplay it. Like, that's just such a Mark Few thing to do. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it here, even though he probably would hate it that we're talking about it right here on the show. We're going to move on. We're going to talk more about Kraziness. We're going to get into our player previews. We'll definitely talk about some of these performances and how they potentially relate to the upcoming season in future episodes. But want to move on now, get to some mailbag questions. Had a lot of great questions come in today, mostly about the Pac-12. And we're going to talk about the key talking points there. We're going to wait to see what other moves the conference is making. We're going to discuss all of that and more coming up here in just a second. Right after I tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster, and they do it for free. And LinkedIn is not just another generic job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who are not actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. And in a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, folks, you're not looking in the right place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that many small businesses are wearing so many different hats that they may just not have the time or the resources to make hiring a priority. And that's why they're constantly finding ways to make that process even easier, including launching a feature that helps you write your own job descriptions. So post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. And we're switching to go through our Mailbag Monday portion of the show here. We got some great questions coming in, a lot of questions about conference realignment, the Pac-12, the WCC, what it all means for Gonzaga. We're going to get into those. This first question here comes from Jeff. Via Gmail, Jeff says, Gonzaga's total student body population is just over 7,300. By comparison, the rest of the Pac-12 schools are larger state-sponsored schools that have student body populations anywhere between 3 to 5 times larger than Gonzaga's. Does this give you any pause with respect to the move Gonzaga is about to make? Gonzaga's situation with the Pac-12 is very similar to what Duke deals with in the ACC or Vanderbilt in the SEC. With that said, I believe Gonzaga will be very competitive in the Pac-12 and will win multiple Pac-12 titles across several sports. What do you think? Yeah, obviously we don't know the full scope of the Pac-12, and I think that's the thing that we're waiting on. How much of an outlier will Gonzaga be in terms of school size and things like that? I mean, if St. Mary's comes along with them, then suddenly Gonzaga is no longer an outlier in that conversation. If the only other addition that happens is Memphis, then Gonzaga remains much smaller than the rest of the schools in the conference. Having said all of that, this isn't the old Pac-12. The old Pac-12 had programs that absolutely dominated the Olympic sports because they had huge huge schools. They had 40,000, 50,000 students. They had massive alumni bases. They were research schools, and they were high academic institutions where a lot of student athletes, high schoolers, wanted to go there. So you'd end up being able to get the best student athletes in swimming and track and volleyball and the other Olympic sports. This isn't that. It's effectively the Mountain West with Oregon State and Washington State and Gonzaga, of course, now. Gonzaga would have been a dominant force in the Mountain West in all sports had they joined back in 2018. I don't think that changes here. I think Gonzaga is going to be highly competitive in the vast majority of sports that they participate in this new conference. Again, depending on some of the additions that happen. There aren't a lot of schools out there that are likely targets for the Pac-12 where I think they come in and we start saying, oh, wow, now Gonzaga is going to struggle in this sport or this sport or this sport. I just don't think that's a significant reality right now, unless if the ACC falls apart, Stanford and Cal come back, maybe the conversation shifts a little bit. But for right now, I think we're looking at a situation where Gonzaga is going to be competitive in the new Pac-12 in the majority of sports. And actually, that kind of leads nicely into this next question from @Salag16 on Discord, who says, how does this new Pac-12 conference project for Gonzaga in other sports? And this question was asked kind of piggybacking off of a question about how the Pac-12 looks in women's basketball, which I didn't answer that question in this show because I talked about it on Friday's episode. So if you're looking for some analysis on what the new Pac-12 looks like in women's basketball, check out Friday's episode of Locked On Zags. For other sports that are not basketball, men's or women's, we'll start with baseball. The Mountain West is not a particularly great baseball conference, with the exception of Fresno State, who is, of course, one of the newcomers into the Pac-12. Fresno State is a quality baseball program, and Oregon State is one of the very best. So between Oregon State and Fresno State, you have two very good baseball programs. Washington State has been solid as well. Gonzaga has been up and down. This last year was not great, but previous years they were very, very good. But the main thing that's going to be interesting about baseball in the new look Pac-12 is that Boise State, Colorado State, and Utah State, they don't have it. So there's going to be other sports this comes up in where not every team has it. So if baseball could end up not being a sponsored sport in the new Pac-12, something to look at for the schools that they look to add going forward. I didn't look ahead of time, but if Memphis doesn't have baseball, or if some of the other schools, UT San Antonio, Texas State, whomever, if the schools that they're looking at don't have baseball, it is possible that Gonzaga either keeps their baseball in the WCC or houses it somewhere else. That is definitely a storyline to keep an eye on for the baseball program. And it's already a significant storyline for men's soccer. A lot of schools that have football don't have men's soccer. That's pretty common. Currently, in the current iteration of the Pac-12 with 8 schools, and only 2 of them have men's soccer, Gonzaga and San Diego State. Those are the only 2 that have men's soccer. So it's very likely that the men's soccer program at Gonzaga will not make it over to the Pac-12 because it will not be a sponsored sport. Very likely. Again, conversations with the WCC about what that means, whether certain sports stay behind, I'm sure they have already happened or are going to happen. We've talked about in the past of Gonzaga taking their basketball schools and leaving the rest of their sports in the WCC probably wasn't an option. But I think with select sports staying in the WCC because they're not being offered in the new Pac-12, I think that is a reasonable thing that we might end up seeing happen. So keep an eye on that, in particular with baseball and with men's soccer. For women's soccer, Washington State, San Diego State, they're both very, very good. Washington State's been excellent nationally recently. Oregon State's been decent. San Diego State, again, has been good. So I think Gonzaga will be competitive, and they'll have some legitimate competition on the women's soccer side in this new conference. Next question comes from AD Simone 206 on Discord, who says, just for a fun exercise, using the currently confirmed schools that are set to join the Pac-12, what would be your predicted finishing order for the 24-25 squads? Start with Gonzaga. Done. Check. Move on. I debated between Boise State and San Diego State. I'm actually going with Leon Rice and the Broncos ahead of San Diego State. I think the San Diego State team is going to take a fairly significant dip. They lost so much talent from last year's team. Meanwhile, Boise State, they lost one big piece. Chibuzo Agbo's out the door. He went to USC, but the rest of that team is pretty much together, and I think they're going to be very solid. So give me the Zags, give me Boise State, then give me San Diego State. Then again, Utah State and Colorado State, and honestly, Washington State are all kind of close. Wazoo, very tough team to pin down because there's so many newcomers on that roster. Utah State's got a new coach coming in, also a lot of new talent. Colorado State, I think will be kind of in that conversation as well. So I went in that order. I went Gonzaga, Boise State, San Diego State, Utah State at 4, Colorado State at 5, Washington State at 6, Oregon State at 7, Fresno State, who hasn't been good in the basketball side in a while, bringing up the rear at 8. Final question in this segment comes from Jeff. He says, schools like Memphis and Texas San Antonio or Texas State are higher priorities for Pac-12 expansion than Sacramento State, and quite frankly, they should be. But could it be that Sacramento State is being positioned to be the fallback option the Pac-12 could pursue if schools like Memphis fail? In that situation, Sac State could easily become the 8th FBS football all-sports member, solidifies the Pac-12, and then the Pac-12 moves on to adding Grand Canyon, possibly other basketball members to become a basketball super conference. Yeah, Jeff wrote a very detailed email with some of the facts about what Sacramento State is currently doing. For those of you who are not following the story, there's a committee at Sacramento State that is pushing really hard to try to get this program into the Pac-12. They've already raised a ton of money. They, in fact, got the Sacramento Kings to agree to let Sac State play their men's basketball, or I think men's and women's basketball games at their arena, which is only 1 mile from Sac State's campus, if they get into the Pac-12. So there are some legitimate momentum, some legs being pushed by Sac State to try to get themselves into the Pac-12. Sacramento is a massive media market, top 20 in the country. They are a program that has decent facilities, but they're not particularly successful in football or men's basketball. Pretty important to be at least good at one of those two sports if you want to join a conference like the Pac-12. I think the Sac State is pretty low on the Pac-12's priority list right now. I think it's behind the schools you mentioned, UTSA, Memphis, Texas State. I think it's behind some other schools potentially in that conversation as well. But if they keep making headlines, they keep raising money, they should be in the conversation. You can squint and see a sleeping giant there with the right thing, with the right stuff in place. I think the fact that the Pac-12 already added Fresno is working against Sacramento State because it feels like they already kind of have a big part of that market. Fresno and Sacramento are not the exact same market, but they're both the Central California market in a sense, enough that I think the Pac-12 doesn't feel like they need to grab that market the way that they might about some other spots. If everything else was true about Sac State, but they were in like Las Vegas or a place that the Pac-12 didn't have a market in, I could see that being a stronger push for them. But right now, I think they're fairly low on the list. Well, folks, attention turns to the WCC to close out the show. Their media day is coming up less than 2 weeks. We're going to talk about what that might look like. We're going to talk about who's going to be in the house. We're also going to talk about how the conference might need to add some new teams. All that and more coming up in just a second. But first, folks, let's talk about game time because I'm looking forward to making a bunch of new memories this college sports season. I was already watching Kraziness in the Kennel while at an Oregon State, Colorado State football game. That's how I was watching the game. Love getting the opportunity to take in as much sports action as we can now that we're in the fall. And great news, you can use Game Time, their new feature, Game Time Picks. It helps make getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And if you're wanting to get to that battle in Seattle game in against Kentucky at the Climate Pledge Arena right now, tickets are $58 on Game Time. They're good seats. You can see the whole arena. You can check it out on Game Time's app. $58. They're super deal, $143 tickets, just a few rows up on the baseline. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. You can get those 2 tickets for less than $100. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege again for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, closing out the show, continuing our mailbag conversation here, talking conference realignment for the most part. 3 more questions to get through before we wrap it up for today. This one comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, last year, the WCC and Mountain West combined together for media days. Do you know if they're doing the same thing this year? That would or could make for some interesting dynamics since 3 WCC teams and 5 Mountain West teams will be moving on to the Pac-12. I wonder if Pac-12 Commissioner Gould will make an appearance. Yes, so they are combining them again. The women's media day for basketball for Mountain West and WCC will be October 16th. The men's will be on October 17th. I'd be shocked if Teresa Gould, the commissioner of the Pac-12, spoke. She may be there. Oregon State and Washington State are going to be there because they are affiliate members of the WCC. So it would make sense that her presence would be there, especially with Gonzaga and basically everybody from her conference. Not basically everybody currently in the conference will be represented at these media days. But the focus for these events is going to be on the upcoming basketball season. Are questions going to be asked about conference realignment? Of course. Your boy right here might ask them. I'm going to be there. I'm excited about it. It's going to be really fun. I'm going to be working with Zach Farmer, the host of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. We're going to do a live stream. We're going to talk to some really cool people. Still waiting on the final details on that, but it's going to be, we're going to have a whole fun week of shows coming up after that event because I got a lot of fun stuff cooking for that. But I think that we will see conversation about realignment. It will be brought up in the media spaces and in some individual conversations that folks will be having, but the focus is going to be on the basketball season. So I wouldn't expect it to be a dominant part of this conversation. Next question comes from Bogmeyer34 on Discord, who says, I know you aren't a WCC podcast. Oh, but I sort of am. But who do you think the WCC goes to after the Zags leave, Denver or Cal Baptist? Okay, so Cal Baptist has always kind of struck me as the most obvious candidate to join the WCC going forward. Part of the WCC's kind of what they're dealing with right now is waiting to figure out what the heck's going on with St. Mary's and Grand Canyon, because Grand Canyon's expected to join in 2025 in 2025. St. Mary's obviously has been a longtime member, but both have been in some level of conversation, or at least have been discussed by the Pac-12. We don't know exactly the severity of those conversations, the significance, anything of that nature. My expectation is that neither of those schools will get invited in the super near future, because I think the Pac-12 is prioritizing getting that last football member before they turn their attention to the non-football schools like Grand Canyon or St. Mary's. So for the WCC right now, they kind of have to, they're not sure what that's going to look like. And trying to make a pitch to a school like Cal Baptist or Denver or somebody like that is difficult, because the value of joining the WCC and the amount of money that your school will make and prestige and things like that hinge greatly on whether Grand Canyon or St. Mary's are in that conference. I mean, massive impact. If those two schools are gone, the WCC is a significantly worse basketball conference. It already takes a huge hit with Gonzaga leaving. There's no doubt about that, a massive hit. But if St. Mary's, Grand Canyon are still in the conference, along with Santa Clara, along with San Francisco, that's still a valuable mid-major basketball conference. And you could go get, I would snap up Cal Baptist immediately, instantly. That's an easy grab for the WCC. Unless Cal Baptist, I don't know why they would stay in the WAC, seeing Grand Canyon leave the WAC, seeing Seattle U leave the WAC, seeing the possibility that some of the football schools in the WAC might get snapped up by the Mountain West. I'd be out the door of the WAC as soon as I possibly could. So if I'm Cal Baptist, gone. I'm taking whatever the WCC offers. I would also like to see the WCC potentially pursue Utah Valley, who's also in the WAC, who's had a significant amount of success in men's basketball. Mark Pope was the coach there. Mark Madsen was the coach there. Pope, of course, now at Kentucky after going to BYU. Madsen, of course, now at Cal. Both have been successful. There's a nice coaching pipeline at Utah Valley. It's in Orem, Utah, which is kind of in the Provo, Salt Lake media area. So it has a nice footprint in a space that the WCC is familiar with and has been before. So to me, Cal Baptist and Utah Valley struck me as the immediate, obvious first two places to go. Denver makes some sense. Geographically, it makes sense. Fit-wise, as an institution, it makes some sense. They're a great hockey school, which their hockey would not. There's no hockey in the WCC. Their hockey would stay in the conference they're in currently. But the facility that they play hockey in, I think, can double for some other sports, so that helps them out. They're a bad basketball school. They've been bad for a while. They haven't been inside the top 200 in Torvik's rankings since 2016. They haven't been in the top 275 of Torvik's rankings since 2018. This is not a good men's basketball program. That would be a bummer addition to WCC. Denver's recent success in men's basketball is not too different from Pacific. I think it's a better school in terms of like the geography and the amount of money they have, and various other things are working for Denver, and they could bump up that basketball performance, but it would be tough to see the WCC pursue a school like Denver that does not have any men's basketball success recently to replace schools like Gonzaga or potentially St. Mary's or Grand Canyon. So Cal Baptist, Utah Valley are higher on my list than Denver, but I think they'll be in that conversation as well. Last question of the show comes from Jeff. He says, the Gonzaga women are having their version of Kraziness in the Kennel at the end of the week. What are you looking to see during this event? Get the same stuff I'm looking for on the men's side every year. I want to see how the new players look. I want to see how the new players look playing alongside the returners. For the women's team this year, there's not as much continuity as there has been in the past. The Trunk twins are gone. Brenna Maxwell's gone. They got some other talented players out the door. Callie Stokes is gone. I think Esther Little's back. Peyton Moom is gone. And they got a ton of new players coming in. You got Inez Betancourt transferring in from UConn. You got McKinley Dalton transferring in from Minnesota. You have Taylor Dalton transferring from St. Mary's. You have some incoming. Lauren Whitaker is a tremendous incoming freshman. She was with the team for the second half of last year, but will make her debut this season. I'm looking forward to seeing how these new players look in their new roster, how they look playing alongside the returners. Like I said, I'm also curious if we'll get an update on how Coach Lisa Fortier is doing. Obviously, she announced her breast cancer diagnosis a few weeks ago. There may not be an update from her. I'm not sure if she'll even be there. I think she's hoping to be there. The plan is for her to be there, but that would be the only things I'm really looking for there is just seeing the new players, seeing how everything goes, seeing if we get an update from Lisa because, her health is the most important thing at this point. Going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Big shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us on our Discord channel. Over 350 people there now. Come hang out. It's free to join. There's a link in the show notes. We're going to be talking college hoops all the dang time. We're going to continue our player preview series this week, talking about every player on Gonzaga's roster. We'll keep talking conference realignment, keep you up to date on any recruiting news, any other updates that come along as we get closer and closer to that scrimmage game against USC and then the start of the season 4 weeks from today. Thanks again, folks, for listening. And until next time, as always, go Zags.